And welcome to another brand new, jam packed, full star studded episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management. I'm your co host, Steve Thomas, and with me is my guest host, Daniel John Gilroy. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Gilroy.
Well, that boy didn't want to show up today. He had to go do something with his churn, so told me to come here and hang out with everybody. So talking about migrating some stuff over. So I figure I'd show up. What's going on?
Well, how are you? How are you? We're going full court press with guests and screens this morning. I mean, viewers streaming at first might think they crashed the team's conference call, but this is the show call, right? Not the prep call. Yeah, my producers are telling me so. All right. So with us today, we have Asavri Navath from the Intune product team. She's responsible for areas of endpoint security and policy, including things like policy analytics, app control, BitLocker workloads, as well as others. We have Peter Vanderwood, longtime MVP. We've been happy to finally have on our show. We've been trying to get this guy for a while. We have also Rodney Peterson, another longtime MVP, and what seems to be the only other person besides me still on Swarm. And then finally, we have Tim Mangan, who is a longtime app packaging, app deployment, app development, app virtualization, everything app MVP, longtime leader of the app packaging community and a personal hero of mine. And this is going to be exciting because we're going to go there today. We're going to talk about cloud migrations, especially for endpoint management, primarily for endpoint management. And we want to know, for those of you out there, including our panel, including our guests, if you've been able to succeed at migrating to the cloud, what were some of your best practices around that? Also, what did you wish you had that would have made things easier? What are some of your lessons learned? And for those of us out there who may still be struggling or still be resistant, why? What's holding you back? Are things missing? Are there things are there stumbling blocks with the migration? It's all up for discussion today. So, Daniel, or Mr. Gilroy, you want to kick us off here with some of your recommended practices?
Well, I'm still on SCCM, so I'm here to understand how you guys are migrating to this cloud thing, because I keep hearing people tell me about the cloud, and this Tune thing migrate stuff, but don't migrate a lot of other things. So I'm here to understand what people doing and how they doing it, so I can go and do it too. So what we got going on today? Ronnie, guess, tell me how I can get my CM stuff to the cloud. That's where I need to be. I can't keep it up. I can't stay in character.
I thought it was going to be me doing that too.
So where we want to start? Somebody talk to me about apps, computers, users. I got to move some stuff up to the cloud. Now how I can get it done?
Well,
all right. Well, first of all,
you go, Tim.
Okay, I was going to say, the apps you should not need to worry about. The apps are the apps. If you've got them ready, you're deploying them through SCCM today. The apps themselves should move over to Intune without an issue. Okay. After that, I'm going to point over to Ronnie.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion going on over the last few years around when you should do migrate and if you should do hybrid or not. I think, looking at SCCM is like, how do I move my stuff over? It's like, if you want to build a project, you won't start with selecting the tools. You would be focusing on your destination. And when you have your destination ready, then you'll go in and look at the tools that you would need to get there, right? So you don't gonna go to Best Buy and get a hammer and go home and see what can I build with this hammer, right? So it's kind of the same thing with Intune and SCCM. These are both tools that you have in your toolbox, right? And when you know what you need to do, you select the right tool that is right for the job. So first thing, don't focus too much on the tools. I totally understand all the investments that you guys have in SCCM and all that, but to be honest, I would rather start, by looking at your destination. So where is it that you want to go, and then start there. And first of all, try to skip the hybrid, AAD joined environment and go from on-prem to hybrid to cloud only. Just go directly to your AAD joined scenario. Get your machine into Intune, and it doesn't really matter if you start by doing everything manually, because you need to focus on the destination. Get a machine to join to the AAD, install the applications that you need, and start working, and make the list of what you need to get that device working, because SCCM is super great, and it's been around for many years. I've been working in this area for like 25 years, and SCCM has been around me ever since I started. And the thing is that you can do a lot of crazy and great thing inside of SCCM, and the people who work in SCCM has been very skilled, but also very creative when it comes to creating collections and scripts and all that stuff. And it's really hard to migrate that one-to-one to the new cloud platform. But the thing is, many of the things that you have built over the years might not even be something that you will need in the new environment. So focus on what's needed and move it when you need it. So does that make sense?
That's a very good start. Very, very good start. I see some questions coming in. I'm gonna go ahead and get back to Steve, so that way I don't hog the show. But I got a lot more questions coming up.
Well, we have a comment from Kenneth on LinkedIn. We could really use a function in Intune for supersedence to force an upgrade on an available application. I guess if Danny were here, I would say, hey, Danny, you might want to take that under consideration as potential P2 Intune Suite option there. But since Danny is not here, I'll have to pass this on to him later, unless you want to, Daniel.
No, we'll take some notes. We'll tell him what happened when he get back. We let him watch recording.
I'll second what Tim said earlier. In fact, in the decades that I've been in IT, one thing I've learned for sure is that when the apocalypse comes and the entire society is destroyed, three things will remain: moss, cockroaches, and Win32 applications. I mean, it's compatibility. There is no issue there. However, some customers want to know about the packaging and delivery of those applications, moving from like SCCM, to Intune. Are there, any folks have recommended practices? Like if I were today, if I were a app deployment administrator, day one at my job, and I had this catalog of 500 applications, and it was my job to make these applications cloud ready and able to, and portable, essentially. What are some best practices? I'll just throw that out there for everyone.
Do I need to go first again?
Well, I was expecting you to start about it, Tim. So
okay, go ahead, Tim. I want to hear what you say, because I got a lot of them applications. I got a lot of them.
Well, one of the things that I've been talking to with customers, the last year and a half or so, has been to focus on the overall life cycle of the applications, and to get out of this mode where you just install and forget about the app forever. Most of my customers, which would be the largest of the enterprises, they have at least 10 to 20% of their applications that nobody in IT has actually touched in the last 10 years. They're just sitting there and they're just continuing to use over and over again. And with the shrinking life cycle of applications, particularly the frameworks that they're built on, the new, the Win32 apps that Steve was talking about, that API has been around for over 30 years, still works. The operating system depends on so much of that stuff so much. I don't think it can ever go away. .NET framework, that's like 15 years. Anything that's like, I think about 4.6 and below is already out of support. If something happens with a CVE, Microsoft isn't going to fix it, right? The new .NET stuff is between 3 and 5 years. They're alternating in the support from the day Microsoft releases .NET 5. 5 years later, it's out of support. So we're going to have to be touching these applications more often, and we're going to have to up our game and how we prepare those applications and get them redeployed. We're going to need to know when there are problems and address them, or when the vendor has their own problems and they're doing new releases. And we're going to have to get these things out on a faster basis. And that's going to mean doing a better job of doing that preparation. I've been doing a lot of stuff with customers with MSIX, and we're actually doing things a little bit differently than the way we did them in Config Manager in one way, which is particularly with the Win32 apps, rather than try to manage the API as a separate install that you're managing externally, we're bundling those things in with the application itself, where it's isolated, a little bit more protected, and that when there's a problem, we can have a good list of what we need to adjust and re-push back out there.
So at the end of the day, portability, essentially.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Hey,
We have a Twitter question.
Hang on there. Peter looked like he had something to say. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Well, not particularly, but I do love the fact that Tim is actually using MSIX with a lot of his customers, but that's actually not something that we're commonly seeing. So we're still seeing a lot of customers actually fighting with those Win32 apps themselves.
Oh yeah, it's not easy to get a lot of those apps working.
So yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by that, Tim, to be honest.
Yes, I want to take some notes here. I heard MSXI, so that's what we need to convert to that, right? And then I get those up into the cloud.
Well, you don't need to do that to get yourself up into the cloud, but that is something that longer term you may well be wanting to look at.
Okay. I like that. So how does that play with security? Like what are those apps and security that one of my guys told me something about these tasks and security endpoint security? Is that something I can use with those apps?
That sounds like apples and oranges to me. But yes.
I see somebody came off mute, so go ahead.
Yeah, sounds like you're talking about security tasks there. So there's been a long-running kind of feature in Intune called security tasks, which if any of you have seen, it's in the endpoint security node. But yeah, apps are a huge part of the tasks that can get listed there. It's basically a ticketing system where your security persona owner in your org, if it happens to be the same person as the IT admin, they will be sending over recommendations from Defender, essentially. If you have Defender running, that tells the IT admins over on the Intune side what apps might require patching, might require an update. I think it also applies for configuration updates. So you can get OS configuration updates sent over as well if that's something that you see is lacking in your organization. If that's something that Defender is reporting as maybe vulnerable in your organization as well. So yeah, definitely the apps that you move over. Well, basically anywhere where Defender would be able to get some signals from your device should support some of that scanning and then security task mechanisms as well.
Excellent. We have a question from Twitter. Should we spend time before migration to ensure our apps are well suited for the cloud before we migrate first or optimize later? I assume contextually they're asking about the app packaging, because if we're talking endpoint management, whether we're actually running from running our system management from ConfigMan or running it from Intune, compatibility is compatibility. That's more of an operating system thing. So I assume they're talking about, again, packaging and deployment.
So two questions I'm gonna add on to that, because that's actually a very good question from that Twitter. Isn't it called X now or something like that? But anyway, regardless, my question is, adding to it, what about the packaging, but also the authentication? Because some of the authentication is not necessarily coming from the cloud. And can I get it from the cloud? Like if I'm authenticating on that app on-prem, can I authenticate all from the cloud?
Authentication? Danny, you're going to get us in trouble.
You know what I'm talking about there.
Authentication.
There you go. That's what I said.
Yes.
That is exactly what I said.
So you're talking about applications that might be a front-end application in the sense that it was using LDAP or something that was on-prem, and getting that authentication into the modern world using modern auth like OAuth, et cetera.
Yep. Because I know Dan got some of them kids over there at that office that done connect the stuff to the on-prem, and how he gonna get that from one to the other.
Well, that is actually a good question, because I think one of the main issues that we're seeing is indeed not with the apps itself, but it's mainly either authentication or connectivity, either one of those two that are the main issues with apps itself. And those are also actually two of the things that are both candidates to still remain in a hybrid setup, because sometimes you can't fix that connectivity or you can't fix that authentication, and you still need to rely on adjustments made by the vendor of the application. So in my opinion, those are two really valid points to still, take on that fight with a hybrid configuration. But yeah, you actually don't want to, but sometimes you just actually have to, and that's really the challenge with those two items there.
And depending on the app, there might be options. If it's a web app, there might be options with app proxy. Although, I've seen customers, as Tim said, when .NET was released, the devs were on that .NET wagon, and everything between 2000 to 2003 using these enterprise libraries that are all dependent upon LDAP. And 20 years later, all of a sudden the apps break, and they're like, we haven't touched these apps in 20 years. And now all of a sudden they broke. And I'm like, you've gotten your money's worth. Let's modernize that application.
Yeah,
those are actually the worst.
Goes through a migration, they really should be doing some rationalization of the applications that they have.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that includes not only the ones that they think they have. As I go through this with customers, typically whatever list they have of what applications they need to migrate, during the migration, they find another, 10%, let's say, of apps that they weren't even on their list.
And sometimes app itself is a stretch. The dangerous thing over the years, in my opinion, about config manager and config manager packages is people could almost treat everything as an app. Like this app, you start dissecting some of the config manager packages people have been using for years, and you realize, oh, this package is like 2 scripts and 3 files. And these batch files put these Excel documents in this directory. And it's like, all right, but we really need to take a hard look at this app and what exactly it does. Of course, you see a lot of that out there. I mean, so much of the financial services world still relies heavily on Microsoft Excel and a lot of the advanced application capabilities it has. And so we create that additional vector of application compatibility there. But anyway, that's quite the rabbit hole that I'll back away from a little bit right now, because we do have another question from Sai on YouTube. What are the ways to eliminate dependencies on on-prem networks and AD? I hear it's not straightforward to eliminate those dependencies. I hear about placing Kerberos on-prem and some Wi-Fi KBs. That might be talking about like Wi-Fi profiles or like. Anyway, let's focus on, how are our experts? I'll put it to you guys. How are you eliminating some of these dependencies on on-prem technologies, like Daniel said, like on-prem authentication protocols, or dependencies on on-premise server libraries?
I think that the Wi-Fi that he's referring to, I might be wrong, but it might be because many Wi-Fi systems is authenticating on the device, being a member on-prem Active Directory in order to get access to the Wi-Fi network. I might be wrong, but I think that's what he's referring to. When it comes to dependencies to the on-prem AD, of course, it varies from industry to industry, but I've been working with a lot of customers in the industrial area, and usually they have very expensive, computers that are, producing or manufacturing specific, items. These machines may be, I've seen up to $5 million for a single device that is not capable of running anything else but Windows 7, and the software running on that machine is heavily dependent on being a member of an Active Directory, and it's not something that you can just go out and change. So in these scenarios, it's really hard to actually go and fix that if you want to be in a supported state. So I think that's a long-term thing that you need to step in when you're acquiring new software and making sure that these requirements are being met. But it is something that is really hard to fix on 100% of your devices. But for most end users or devices that actually has an end user, I would say that we have been able to fix most of the issues that we have seen. But
So
there
that
are
scenario
scenarios,
shouldn't
but
keep you from getting the other people moved over, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, because we're working with customers with plus 20,000 seats, and usually what we see is that production environment, but also in retail, if you have maybe hundreds or thousands of stores around the world on very, very, very thin lines, even if you go in and do white glove scenarios, there might be some scenarios where you have this very tiny line where autopilot and doing everything from the cloud is not really a good experience for the end user. But this is a result of technical depth being around for some customers for many years. But usually we will be able to fix around 90% of the devices or so. And I think even if you have these small set of devices that you won't be able to fix on the short term, I don't think that should keep you away from starting this journey, because this is something that will be that will take, for some customers it will take many years to get there, but for other customers it might be a very short and easy journey. But for the AAD and AD dependencies to the on-prem, it's old software, and we're not going to change that and upgrade that just overnight. Just like said, Tim, some of the software has been around for 10 years and nobody has touched it. So once you start to deploy that to an AAD joint device, there will be some issues that needs to be fixed and worked on.
All right.
What about the user objects then, Ronnie? Are you also moving those to cloud only, or still leaving them in a hybrid setup?
No, we are leaving them in a hybrid, because
Okay.
there's so many dependencies to that. But that's another thing, and working with retails and working with manufacturing, we also see these one machine, many users working in shift environments, and many of the especially if you want to deploy a fully zero trust environment, there are some scenarios where multi-factor authentication and every user don't have their own identities is an issue, and there's workaround with that, but it is still something that a lot of customers is struggling with. But it can be done, and but at the point it needs to be work around, using F3, F1, whatever license that you're acquiring. And then you also have systems that are traditionally being logged on with auto log on, and in that scenario, it's also something that you need to work with your Windows Hello for Business strategy. Yeah, so we see
are
that too.
getting some awesome audience questions here, and the audience is starting to go where I want them to go. the art of the possible, asking us for tools. And we just had one that said, can we expect some AI migrator in the future? You knew the AI thing was going to come up at some point. And, there's a lot of what we call management AI innovation and some things that are leading towards that. And it just so happens we have someone here from the product team, Savri. I believe you work on policy analytics, don't you?
Yeah, I do work on policy analytics. We're using, as most of you probably know, it's not AI. This has been around for quite a while. It's just using our normal Microsoft intelligence of our devs and PMs and feature teams there. But essentially, we had been collaborating with the Windows team on building out mappings for group policy to MDMs. This is for like this policy setting side of the migration to the cloud, like we've been talking about apps so far, talking about identity, and now we're specifically for the settings piece. Policy analytics can help with that, to the capabilities of being able to basically do the import of your existing group policy on-prem. And then the idea, besides calling it an analytics tool, is we imply that it should not be, just import your GPOs and move them to a settings catalog policy in MDM. Like take the time to spend some time looking at your data. And then migration in that sense is we have a wizard, similar to how you've maybe created settings catalog policies in the past. You can definitely use our wizard to kind of look at the policy settings that do have MDM equivalents. They can go ahead and create a settings catalog policy using our tool there. So not using AI today, but obviously in general, AI has a lot of potential to help with many scenarios. If there's, ideas that our customers have in this space, like I know our team, my partner teams would be very interested in knowing how we can help. We do have that migrate capability in GP analytics today, if that's something that's interesting and solves a need right now, until we figure out if AI is the right way to go for some of these scenarios. But that's an interesting perspective for sure on being able to kind of utilize the new models for understanding, text and settings, and try to simplify the process for customers.
So we also have a question from Malesh on the tech community. I wanted to inquire about any plans for improvements to the Intune backup and restore feature. We do backup and restore in Intune? Well, anyway, in upcoming releases, any plans of improvement in the pipeline to address aspects like more control over what is backed up, options to automate backups, cross-tenant backup? I think they might be... Malesh, if you're still there, are you talking about migrating like from a test tenant to a production tenant, like import export with graph API functions? Maybe we can get some clarity on that question. What are your thoughts, Danny? Or Daniel?
I still use tape backup here in my environment. It's still tape backup over here, so I'm not quite sure. I didn't even know that the Intune.
I don't think they're talking about that. I don't.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Intune definitely doesn't do tape backup. Question from Raphael on the tech community. Hi, team. Will there be some improvements regarding the migration path of hybrid ADJ to AAD join or intra, whatever we're calling that this week, when using third-party MDM solutions? For example, Barramundi to Intune. I get that question a lot of times. Just generically, is there a plan for like a version of like the old ADMT software from back in the day for moving from instead of changing the domain membership of a Windows device, changing it from an on-prem domain to AAD, and I imagine keeping everything there. I get that question a lot. That's probably one of the most asked tools that I've ever received in the last few years. What are your thoughts on that? What are you guys doing to kind of migrate state from on-prem to the cloud?
So are we just talking Azure AD, Active AD join? Whoa, it's that old I can't even pronounce it anymore. Are we actually referring to Directory domain join to hybrid Azure Active Directory domain join, or to Azure AD join?
Or any device that has any mechanism of domain joined to just cloud. I like to say on-prem identity to exclusively cloud identity for devices, for example.
Yeah, because that's to my knowledge, always a reset of the device, because there is no supported path from Microsoft.
Right, that's
from
the recommendation.
The on-prem AD to the Azure AD. So there is not much in between there, unless you don't want to be in a supported state.
But I see customers do that a lot, and they seem to not be a huge problem when they do it, right?
That could be, yeah.
So tell me more about this resetting this device thing. What does that mean? What are we doing with resetting device? Are we putting MDT back on that thing? What are we doing?
No, not MDT. That's re-imaging.
Oh, okay. Well, somebody set me straight. What's the reset?
Well, whether you're doing a push button reset on Windows 10 or Windows 11, or doing it remotely from an autopilot reset, basically just taking the machine back to its out-of-box experience state and joining Intra and or Azure AD historically, and letting the auto enrollment kick in, and basically doing the hard cutover to a cloud managed device. I've been on both sides of that. Obviously, I've been on all three sides of it. I've been on the side of a vendor. I've been on the side of having to help people do it. I've been on the side of being an end user at Microsoft who, had machines that were dormant for multiple months when we got kicked out of our offices, and we were told for those machines the solution is to reset, and we reset, and all my stuff came back because we had moved all our workloads MSIT to the cloud, and it was relatively painless for me. But I wasn't using any kind of legacy client server applications. Most of my stuff is in OneDrive. And so I had kind of adopted a cloud lifestyle. And, I like to use that term with customers about socializing and educating people to adopt a cloud lifestyle or a cloud digital lifestyle, to get used to keeping their stuff, in resources that aren't tied to a device, but are rather tied to a service. And it's helped because users are often a big part of that migration struggle, moving their cheese, changing their methodology, especially a lot of task-oriented workers. So it takes some training. So are there any community tools out there that we could recommend that aren't actually officially sanctioned tools, but some of the MVPs or some of our experts out there that might have put some solutions together? I know I see a lot of cool stuff out there on GitHub from time to time that leverages Graph to do a lot of cool things. I'll just put this out there for the MVPs who are with us today. Are there any tools that you've seen from the community that have been very helpful? I'll put Ronnie on the spot. How's that?
Well, I just posted in our private chat the link to make his Intune management tool that is capable of backing up and restoring and copying and exporting, all of the Intune settings and policies. I'm actually using that a lot. Also, when I'm going into new customers, I have my set of standard policies, so I use that to just easily import those policies. But there's also another question in the chat right now around, capturing BIOS information of all endpoints. I'm not exactly sure what bias information means. Some of them is already included in Intune, but if you need more details, there's actually a good blog post over the MS Endpoint Manager blog where you can actually extend the inventory information of all your Intune devices by using proactive remediation scripts to collect that information. So that's a really, really great resource if you want to extend your capabilities of Intune. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Oh, it does. And a little bit of housekeeping here. Note that when we suggest tools that come from the community or come from outside Microsoft, those are not official tools and they're not officially supported by Microsoft. And the usual disclaimer of let the buyer beware, just in case. Always test in a non-production environment when leveraging these community tools. Okay, disclaimer over. Yeah, I noticed that question too about capturing bias information or on the endpoints. I guess it's a reporting capability that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's basically about extending the inventory, like Ronnie also mentioned, and with log analytics on the end on the back end, you can achieve a lot. So basically, anything that you want to collect, you can put it in log analytics and create some awesome dashboards around it with KQL. So you should be knowing KQL now anyway nowadays. So especially for something like this, it could be an easy start.
Oh, absolutely. I tell if you're an endpoint manager, especially one that's been around for 20 or 25 years, remember how you had to learn WQL years ago as a config man guy? You should now learn KQL. And there's plenty of resources out there, not just in the endpoint management space, but in the operations management space, in the modern security ops center space. KQL is an important skill, right up there with PowerShell. So I have to ask Tim, I'm a big fan. I don't want to go all fanboy, but remember when you were with SoftGrid?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it was Softricity, but
yeah.
Remember when you made SoftGrid?
Yeah, I'm not that old. I still remember.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Was there a question there beyond that?
No, I was just fanboying out there. That's all. That's all. Channeling a little bit of that Chris Farley character there. No, I have to say, when years ago when I was in Microsoft support, and we were supporting what used to be called SoftGrid, it eventually became AppV. But you'd walk down the cubicle of the AppV support team, and every one of those cubicles had on its shelf one or more Tim Mangan books on SoftGrid and AppV. Those were the definitive references. So got to get a historical shout out to you. You always knew that you would have at least a couple of dozen people buying your books because it would be the Microsoft support people. Okay. All right. Back on track here. Question from Nigel. Speaking of community tools, any news on this tool or similar tools to migrate SCCM applications to Intune? I assume they're talking about the packaging, like migrating to the Win32 wrapper for Intune. We are leveraging code management to install applications in our Azure AD initiatives while tackling applications separately for our clients. Well, I would put that question to Danny Guillory, but is Danny Guillory here? Or will we have to relay this through Daniel?
I can answer that for him. I can do that. I can definitely do that one.
Okay, you've been talking to Danny. Okay, all right, excellent.
He's been texting me. I keep getting these little bubble things in the text, and it's like he's sending me a long message. But okay, whatever. So I know that people want a tool to migrate apps, but I don't think that's what they really want, because I don't want it. It don't make no sense. The things that need to be done, that just ain't done yet. All the things you got in your SCCM that would want to migrate over, that's probably not what you really want to do. When you look at what the things that SCCM can do, because I've been looking real hard. There's a lot of things that SCCM can do, especially with applications. But when it comes to what Intune can do with the applications, I can get the applications there, but then I got other problems. So I keep talking to Danny about it, but he ain't got nobody to actually do the thing yet. So I'm gonna keep on him, because I know that's what we all want, and we gonna see what it is that he can do. But it looked a little not really possible just yet. There's some things in Intune that need to be done first that I think needs to clear it up, and then maybe something will happen. But until then, I think you're just gonna wind up creating a problem. But me and Danny butt heads on that one. That's kind of why he bald now, because we sit here and argue all time. He don't have this. He ain't got this. This ain't him. I squish and wet this up all day. He can't do it. Bald head.
I can't imagine why they're pulling our funding. I can't imagine at all. All right. So we have another question from the tech community. We are currently deploying web threat protection, but I do not have access to Intune, as Intune is currently being rolled out slowly and enrolled with devices. That means we have to resort to Config Manager and potentially create a configuration baseline with web threat protection settings for Microsoft Edge. Can you recommend an implementation for this or provide the best approach?
Don't get quiet now. Come on now. I need that one too.
Well, I will turn. We have somebody from policy. I would imagine that this is, I would imagine for this individual, our built-in baselines that come with Intune, especially the ones from Microsoft Edge, may not always be a one-size-fits-all approach. But I'll put Asavri on the spot here and see if this is something she could possibly address.
Yeah, thanks. I was reading this question. I'm not sure if they're saying, like, can we configure this through Config Manager until our devices all have Intune or are Intune enrolled and can get Intune policy, at which point then they can use the baseline options that are in Intune. This might be a knowledge gap for me, but I'm not sure if Config Manager also has that concept of baselines for settings specific to Edge, and if that's the only option for this customer, given that it sounds like Intune isn't completely rolled out for all their devices are not enrolled yet. So that's something I'm not sure about, but there are security baselines in Intune for Edge specifically that's being built out. Or we Intune provide kind of the platform, the reporting on those settings, but the actual settings and the values for those are coming from the experts in that space. So for Edge, there's Edge team owners that would work on that. For Windows baselines, there's Windows teams owners that would work on that. So maybe that's something to look into. There's also like a dedicated threat protection, or at least I believe so, in endpoint security profile for that. And then of course, settings catalog has every setting that could be configured, every or most settings. And the only reason it may not have settings is because we believe that there needs to be a more curated experience, which we would move to endpoint security for that, for example. So maybe that's something to look into, or maybe to identify which devices might need to start getting enrolled into Intune a little bit more quickly if the Intune is the only option there. I'm just not entirely sure if Config Manager can do all of the baseline settings that you're looking for web threat protection settings for Edge.
I'm really interested in kind of the story that was told in that question, only because I've run into a couple of customers who are completely skipping the co-management route, which I was like, really? Why? And because they're actually doing this on the back of a Windows 11 migration. And what they're doing is they're letting attrition come in with their hardware cycle, where they're leaving Windows 10 and config manager people on Windows 10 and config manager people. And when the hardware refresh comes in, they're reissuing Windows 11 completely cloud managed, and they're creating this 2 to 3 year cycle toward 2025. And, I ask, how's it going? And they're like, well, from time to time, we have some, UI glitches, and we have some training that we have to do. And, if users are in the same work group side by side, sometimes their experiences are different. And you have a case of the Windows 10 people looking at the Windows 11 people with a little bit of jealousy because, hey, how come you have that cool little thing and I don't have this cool little thing? But they tie it all to the hardware cycle, which is, I think, pretty cool. Okay, I've got to stop rambling here because we got a lot of more questions coming in. All right. We need BIOS configuration, not capturing, but configuration. Is there some news from the main manufacturers about, Dell, Lenovo, Microsoft to integrate BIOS configuration into Microsoft Intune? I'm going to read into that and assume, are we going to be expanding on the firmware management capabilities in Intune with more vendors? I don't know if we have specific owners on this, but maybe if Danny or Savri know this. If not, I guess we can message this back. But it sounds like this person wants to be able to control more firmware across multiple hardware manufacturers.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm not aware of plans or lack of plans on this one. It's just something we can follow up with the team that owns it on that. So looks like it's from Tech Community, so we can get back to you on that one.
Another question on LinkedIn. So if I have an image ready for a specific laptop model for AD, is there any tool to transfer it into Intune? Okay, I'm going to read into that and say, is there a way for me to deploy images from Intune? I think autopilot in image crafting or configuration using out of the box enterprise ready hardware vendor images is the wave of the future. I don't want to speak for Danny and Asavri, but I don't see Intune being an image deployment bare metal solution, which is, I'm assuming that's what's being asked there.
Steve, I kind of wonder, because one of the things I really like that Microsoft has been doing is the whole Winget mechanism that's under the covers there, and how that is extensible, at least in theory. I think there's more work to be done there, but I think it becomes very possible for innovations, either in the partner community or wherever, to be able to extend the kinds of things that you can deploy using Intune to define, well, here's the thing, but now you have your extension that says, here's the private repository with that stuff, and here's the mechanism to actually implement when it gets down onto the system. And I think that could be really exciting eventually as that continues to evolve.
Oh, I am so happy that our app dev community, and more importantly, our app management product team and app packaging product teams saw the writing on the wall that was out there and kind of shifted. I want to go on the record. I was never a fan of forcing desktops, especially traditional enterprise desktops, into the mobile app store world, which is essentially what we were doing. And eventually we saw the light, and we saw the success, especially in DevOps, of Chocolatey and Nougat and actual package repos for applications. And thus, Winget and the Windows Package Manager were born. And, that I couldn't agree with you more, Tim. I want to see us move further in that direction, because you're not forced into for one thing, you're not trying to force people into one specific container to rule them all. I was wrong, Tim. I thought we would eventually move to one package format to rule them all. But this thing called culture ate me like strategy for breakfast. And you have to live reality on reality's terms, and the reality on reality's terms goes back to what I said earlier. Win32 and MSI installers are going to be here probably past the apocalypse. I still am a believer in MSIX, and I think the fact that you have flexibility with these repositories is going to mean more more adoption, because it's going to be more easier to adopt. Okay. Ronnie, you're a little bit quiet there. You want to comment on the image deployment?
Well, I think I know the scenario, and usually, the scenario would be that the image or the operating system on the device is unusable in a state that you can't reset it. So how do you get that image on that device again? And many of the vendors, including Dell, that we are working close with on their newer devices, is actually supporting that you can download a optimized image, including drivers, directly from the buyers in most new models. So if you have a new, for example, Dell device that is less than a year or maybe 2 years old, then you'll be able to actually download the latest image directly from the hardware vendor. And I think that's probably the right way to go if you want that scenario, because also if you are sitting somewhere and your device is crashed, well, then you can actually go directly into BIOS and re-imaging using that system. If, let's say, for an example, that you could actually put that image into Intune and being able to deploy that would also require that the hardware without an operating system would be capable of actually communicating with Intune, and that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So this is a vendor specific solution, and that's the way it should be, I think. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
Everybody's quiet.
We're down to our last 5 minutes, and we do have another question from Shashi on the tech community. I have devices that are hybrid AD joined and co-managed. Now I want to bulk fresh wipe the devices using Intune and Graph API in a way that they would be disconnected from their on-prem AD and would only be joined to Azure AD. If I use clean Windows wipe with keep user data parameter as true, would my devices at the time at Ubi stage be disconnected from on-prem AD and only be joined to Azure AD? I'm not sure.
It looks like they're asking, will a device transform from on-prem to cloud AD? I don't have the answer to that one. And it's in tech community, so I think we should come back and give a full answer on that one. Steve, are you here?
Yeah.
Are you here, Steve? Steve. Testing, Steve. That's what happens when the show's almost over, folks. Well, there he goes. There, Steve, can you wave to the people? You did.
Yeah, tech problems on my end. Let's go ahead and move to final thoughts. We'll start with Peter.
Final thoughts in what sense, Steve?
Well, what are your final thoughts around migration? What would you like to leave us with?
Don't think in problems, but think in solutions. So yes, a hybrid is there to stay, especially if you look at the identity part of things. And apps, especially in authentication and connectivity, will always be sure to take enough time within your project to look at that in depth. I think that's my main takeaway from here.
Ronnie, you're next.
Oh, there's so many things. I would like to build on top of what Peter said. Don't aim for the perfect, but aim for something that is working for you, and don't try to fix all the small things in the beginning. Focus on the broad scenario and where you want to go, because it is a journey, and when you move from on-prem to cloud, things are also being updated so often that even the thoughts that you have today, when you get there, things might have been changed, or there's been a new version or new features has been released. So don't focus on the details, focus on the destination.
Tim.
Okay, well, I think that as you move forward, you need to focus on getting some modernization in place, but cloud does not need to be the end destination for you, but hybrid could be. And so you could start with that mentality. And then once you get yourself into that mode, then you can continue that work if it makes sense to your organization. And it might not make sense to your entire organization. There may be parts that are cloud only and parts that are going to be hybrid for quite some time.
Aspari.
I was just going to say, try, if you are in the process of migrating policy settings, try the policy analytics migration tool. You can create a policy without even assigning devices if that's not something you figured out yet in terms of what device groups to go after. So that's a possibility you can use. And if you don't need to go through that process of migrating the settings and you want to start, like it was mentioned earlier, like for cloud first devices, maybe with the OS update, the hardware refresh, you can try some of our baselines, and maybe that will help kind of at least get you a pulse on how to manage settings in Intune without needing to go through the migration process, if that makes sense, for some of the new cloud first devices. So yeah, that's about it for me.
Awesome. Well, I have to say, this has been a great show. It's been interesting and funny at times. I really appreciate having our special guests from both the product team as well as our esteemed MVPs. Next month, let's say you're an endpoint manager and your company's being sued and you yourself have got a subpoena. How do you avoid getting fined, especially if you're administering endpoints managed by Intune in a Microsoft 365 estate? It's going to be an interesting topic, and yes, we're going to go there on some things. So join us in September. And once again, on behalf of Peter, Tim, Aspari, Ronnie, and Daniel Guillory, I'm Steve Thomas, and this has been Unpacking Endpoint Management. Thank you.